by having his three sons, we don't know for sure whether it was his three sons that actually did the conquering, probably, because that's how it often worked. And because they're not just sitting at home layabouts and then all of a sudden he sends them off and says, I've got this grand new territory for you. Generally you earn it, and he had loads of sons, as you know, probably by the tens of thousands. I mean, he had so much sons, it was unbelievable. He sure did leave yeah, he was quite a stallion. Anyway, yeah, his DNA is all over. I mean, it's incredible what he achieved. So he was a master of the battlefield and the bedroom as well, sounds like. That's the way it was done, and it was sought after. But the three sons were Connell, Owen, and Enda. And those are three very powerful names right down to this day. Now, the ones that we're concerned with here is Owen and Connell. So Tyrone or Tyrone, you remember again, Tyr is the Irish word for the Gaelic, if you want to call it the Gaelic word, for a country. So Cheer. And it's like CH, like cheer, CHEER is how it's pronounced. Cheer. So the Tyrone is a slightly larger area than the current Tyrone. That's where the word Tyrone comes from. So Tyrone, and the was in the middle, right in the middle of Ulster, and on the west coast, which is now Donegal, the county of Donegal was Tirconnell. Now, the name Donald or MacDonald or O'Donnell and all that is a little more broad-based. It's not somebody as specific as Neil. And we'll talk about Neil in a minute again, in the context of names and how names are so important and how you can read so much into names if you look, especially if you understand the Gaelic and the Irish language. The Irish word for the world is Dawan. I don't know if you come across that in Shanty's class. You have Dawan. Now, the word, a very popular name in ancient Ireland was Donnell, which comes from Down. And Donnell is sort of like a world-class figure. He was now remember, their concept of the world wouldn't be a round ball like ours. They hadn't seen the NASA picture from, so they didn't have quite the same concept of the world. The world to them would be the world that they lived in. Ireland and what they knew about the rest of it. But the word Donald is a praising name. It's a what's the word? When you really when you praise somebody, you're a power of a man. You're a world-class man. So Donald or Donald. So that's where that word would have come from, and it goes way back. There were Donalds and Donalds long before the O'Donnells, but the country of Connell, Tirconnell, would have been ruled by descendants of Connell for several hundred years. And it wasn't until 901 that a person called Donald, I hope I get that right now, in 901, because I don't write things down, I talk, as you know. I'm pretty sure that's when it was. So the first Donald, yeah, he died. Here we are. A little bit of something here. All these are the answers to Donald. Just in the case, Great Donald said, the Donald particularized in the case of the great Tirconnell Sept, who died in 901, was himself descended from the famous Nile of the Nine Hostages. So, and then he obviously was a particularly noteworthy chief of the Tirconnell, and they pretty well, they named the tribe and the people after him was O'Donnell, from O'Donnell, like O'Neill, so he kind of established his own reputation, his own lineage. Now they were still the descendants of Connell, so that's sort of like a little quirk. So between 500 AD and 1600 AD, somewhere around 900 AD, they picked up the name Donald and O'Donnell, and he was as I said, a very noteworthy person. Now, what confuses people about the O'Donnell name is that it pops up, in a number of other places, but they would be unrelated because of the antiquity of the name Donald. It does not go back to just one guy. It just happens that the O'Donnells of Tirconnell and the Red Hugh O'Donnell in 1607, that fled in 1607, was descendants of Donald of Tirconnell. Down where I come from, again in the west coast of Ireland, there's a very important area where there are O'Donnells. But I would personally, even if historians say that they're related, I'm pretty sure they're not.
Are there different spellings of it?
No.
Oh, is it the same?
No. Remember now, the spelling, if you were to go back through Middle and Early Irish, it would be Donald, it would be the Irish name. The spellings that we're familiar with is anglicized. So the Donald and O'Donnell is an anglicized version of O'Donnell, D-O-M-H, with the Donald, N-A-I-L. But it definitely comes from down, from the world. That's fairly well accepted by historians in Ireland. Again, because what we know about how they name people. Actually, Neil, the old Nell, I've read some good, interesting stuff here on where that goes back to. Names like Owen, but that goes back to Milesian times. If I could find it real quick here, this guy did a pretty good somewhere in here about. So they would be conscious, you see, of how their names connected back to Milesians, the Milesian times, the early Gaelic times.
Which would be, what, about 400 BC?
Oh, much earlier than that.
Earlier?
Yeah, when people talk about 400 BC, they usually are referring to the Celts. But, it is now, even by the British scholars, accepted that the Gaels did not come through England. They came, as they say, directly from Europe. Even the most Anglophile scholars now accept that. Whereas for centuries, the prevailing wisdom was that Ireland was at the end of a migratory path through Britain, that they all came through. Whereas there's so much to disprove that. So the best that even the most ardent Celtic scholars can impose upon us is that there was a strong Celtic invasion or migration. It certainly couldn't be described as an invasion because there's no great battles associated with it. They didn't leave a big stamp behind like the Normans did and so on. So that it would have been a fairly strong migration from Britain into Ireland because of superior technology, largely because they were Iron Age people. So the Celts were the first Iron Age people in Europe, and inevitably they came to Ireland, but they didn't conquer Ireland. And they adopted the old Gaelic tongue. So that is generally accepted to be somewhere around 400 BC, which would be a few hundred years later than when the Celts were fairly well established in the Danube Valley and had migrated, spread out, because they had perfected the art of iron smelting. So, unfortunately, though, that became superimposed on the old Gael. But now, because of more better scholarship, they understand that it couldn't possibly have been, the Gaelic language is so totally different from anything that could be conceived as European. So